Well, hello everyone. It's about that time. This is your amazing new host, Dr. Mischele Watson, and I personally want to welcome you to my new podcast, Let's Just Talk About It, the premier place to keep up to date on some amazing topics and discussions that will encourage you to consider the phenomenal power of change. I hope you enjoy the show, so let's get straight into it. Hey y'all, this is Dr. Mischele Watson, and welcome to our episode of Let's Just Talk About It. I am so excited because we have an amazing guest that's joining us today for this episode of our podcast. And if I could really describe this person in the terms that I really want to, we would be here all night. So we're not going to do that. I'm just going to take a few minutes to introduce our guests because they're going to join me today to talk about blended families. Yay or nay, right? Drama or not. So we're excited to have join me today none other than my firstborn, Ty, over here. And why don't you give her a hand? Yes, Ty is joining us.
Hey, everybody.
She's not as soft and humble as she sounds like. But we're excited because this is going to be a great conversation today as we talk about blended families. And we know this is something that many of you out there are experiencing right now. So we felt that this conversation, we'd have an opportunity to pull back the layers of the onion and really talk deeply, right? Honestly, transparently, and authentically about blended families. Why? Because we both have experience in having blended families, right? And so I'll start out with my story first, and then we'll add Ty into the conversation. And so ultimately, I was a part of a blended family where I had two children, and the person I was having in a blended family with also had two children, brought two children to the family, and then we had two children together. We had a Brady Bunch going on over here, right? But I wanted to share really briefly how there were more successes in my blended family than there were failures. More successes than failures. And I'm going to tell you why there were more successes. I think more of the conversations we had on how important a blended family could be than us just kind of jumping into it and trying to figure it out as we went along, on the job training, right? We were very purposeful in talking and having conversations about our blended family, which gave us, again, many more successes than failures. And so I'm excited to say, though, that even years later, 40 years later, those relationships are still very much connected because of us being very intentional about our blended family. So we're going to jump in a little bit in this conversation with Ty today as she talks a little bit about her blended family and what it looks like today. And then we'll just kind of begin to pull back the layers of the onion a little bit and get just a little bit deeper into some of the chaos, maybe the challenges, the opportunities that made your blended family successful. How about we do that?
Absolutely.
All right, so why don't you start a little bit?
Okay, so my blended family journey started, as my mother stated, when I was 5 years old. And I grew up in a very traditional, wholesome home, I would say. And I do believe that growing up in a blended family did prepare me for a time where I would enter into my own blended family. So my husband and I are coming upon 10 years of marriage this year. And when my husband and I married, he had 6 children. Wow, I know, like a big number. 6 children, and I had 2 children. 5 of his children were adults at the time. and he had one that was under 18, around 10 years old. And I had I'm trying to think of the ages now, 2 years old and maybe 6 years old. And we did not go into it with a plan and a purpose. My husband was very forthright in telling me, I'm going to be raising my son and I want to be with someone who wants to be a part of that journey. Um, and actually, honestly, it was something that I felt comfortable with because I wanted somebody who understood having children and having responsibility. So it was something that was a actual check plus for me where it may have not have been that way for someone else. I believe that if you want to have a successful foundation with a blended family, then it needs to start with God. That's just where it is. That's just the facts of the matter. Um, I know a lot of times we build upon the fluff, or are the children good? Are the children well behaved? Do they listen? All of those things have nothing if you don't have God, and if He is not the foundation. Because in a family where there is no blend, a traditional family, you can have the siblings who don't get along, or the jealousy, or the rivalry, or the you're doing this for them or that. So it can become amplified in a blended family. So if you don't have God as your foundation, He's not your source. I do believe that you will struggle in a blended family. When my parents married, my father, my stepmother, everybody was on board for the success of the children. And I think that that's probably number two. Right under God is, do you want these children who you are choosing to blend to be successful? So those are like the top two things that I think are the most important when doing a blended family, and what has helped my blended family to be successful as well.
Absolutely. So that's a good segue into this because you shared a little bit about both of our your me as your mother, your stepfather, and then your father and his wife, how we all collaborated together to ensure that our children would be successful in an environment to accept correction, discipline, in different homes.
Absolutely.
Right. And so what would you say to someone that is in a blended family and they're struggling in their relationship with the other parent and accepting the blended family now because they're no longer a part of that circle?
So I think the most important thing, and I'm not saying this to sound overly righteous or anything like that. But wherever the struggle lies, the party that's connected to that person has to set the ground rules. Okay, so I couldn't set ground rules with my husband's ex-wife. He had to set those ground rules. And the reason that I say that is that that's where the connection lies. The connection is not with you. The connection is with that previous person. And they need to, and their feelings and their concerns need to be honored to help it to be successful. We started very chaotically in our journey. It was not healthy. It was not. Um, we were all putting our own emotions in the front, and so we had to get to a point where we said, okay, we can't. And the prophetess one time that I found said, do not come in agreement with disagreement. We can't agree to disagree because now we've come in agreement with being in disagreement. So that is
That's
no-go.
good.
That is a no-go. You are now saying, yeah, we just have to agree to disagree. No, we can't agree to disagree. We have to agree to agree. And even if that takes a lot of conversation, and even if that takes a lot of give and take, we have to get there. And people will say, well, I'm dealing with somebody who's toxic. They don't want this. They're not going to put forth the effort. Then you have to make a hard decision. And that decision is going to be whether they're going to be a part of the success of your blended family. There will be people who just don't want to do it. And there's no amount of you showing the example that's going to make them buy in until they want to buy in. So there may be situations where the person that you're dealing with from the past is not going to be a part of the success of your blended journey, of your blended family journey. And that's okay. I'm a firm believer that sometimes outside resources can give you a better picture and pull out the emotion that everybody on the inside is feeling and looking at. So if you have that, I believe that that's a great way to kind of get everybody on the same page, whether it be mediation, whether it be a family friend that knows both parties. Use the resources that you have in your village, in your family, in your community to help to make your blended family success. If you want it to be successful, if you are in love with someone, if you want your families to blend well, if you want to live with peace and joy, then there may be things that you have to do legwork to get it to be successful. So those are the things I think can help as you're kind of getting on your journey.
Absolutely. So you said something a little bit about the buy-in.
Mhm.
Okay, that's really important that blended families understand the buy-in that comes with it. And everyone doesn't necessarily come with the same knowledge and background and experience that will ensure that the relationship is positive versus toxic.
Correct.
Right? And there are also lots of trauma that comes with a blended family, right? Because there are different relationships that are created as a result of that person's upbringing from a child versus relationships that they've been in that have now created a scenario that makes it very challenging for a blended family to be successful. What would be some of a great suggestions around getting buy-in for a family to first and foremost realize that they want to make this work outside of their own feelings of who I don't want that person to have anything to do with my child.
Okay. So if you both parties have decided to move on, have conversations early. Um, Leaving them in the dark will leave them feeling left out. Um, and you not having conversations early, um, I remember early on saying to my children's father, I'm talking to someone, I'm going to engage the children with him. I would like for you to meet him. There are just circumstances where everybody has to be an adult. And everybody has to lay their cards on the table. Um, so sometimes I can't say that it will always be easy, but it will be right. Easy is not always like doing it the easy way. It may not be that, but it is the right way. And putting your cards out there early, depending on your children's ages, having conversation with your children. If your children are teenagers, I would really say my son is 8, but he more like 27. So I can't, it's depending on your children and their maturity level. My youngest understands way ahead. But if your children are at an age where you feel like should enter into the dialogue or enter into the conversation, don't leave them out because you're the adult and you feel like I'm making this decision. That's not you need their buy-in too. You need their happiness and joy to make it more successful. I do consider myself very blessed that I've always gotten along with all of my siblings. We're still extremely close today. And my children, even with their siblings and their stepbrothers and sisters, they're all very close. And I know that it's the work that my husband and I have put in to help them nourish their relationships. My firstborn son, actually, and my stepson, growing up, my son was maybe 5 and my stepson was maybe 12, 11. You would think they were tight. And I mean, they would dress alike and they did the sports together. And my stepson entered into our family as the oldest, whereas in his family, he was the youngest. So different circumstances and scenarios where he was maybe the baby in the family. Now in our family, when he's with us, he's the leader and he's the oldest. So it really takes a lot of dialogue, knowing your children, communicating honestly about your children's strengths and weaknesses, putting it all out there so that nobody feels blinded when something happens or when a circumstance happen with an ex or a child's parent. They're not blindsided by the things because you put all the cards on the table in the beginning. When you were talking about like how to make it successful, if you're a person who's considering a blended family and you're saying, should I even date this person? They have children. I really like them, but I don't really like kids. this ain't for you. This isn't your journey and this isn't your path. And that's okay. But I do believe that some people are unrealistic with themselves. Oh, well, they're not gonna do that with me. A person gonna choose their child every time as they should. Okay.
Absolutely.
So it is important before you hone into creating this blended family that you are real with yourself and whether you can accept someone else's children.
That's a good point. It's a good point because often we live in la la land, right? And we think, oh, they're just gonna do what I'm gonna say to do, and that parent is gonna respect me, or they're just not gonna be a part of our family, and all of the elements that create discord, right?
Selfishness.
Selfishness. Wow, selfishness. That you think it's gonna be my way or no way.
Selfish.
So how do you figure out, and I like what you said, you shared, if you're not somebody that like kids,
This isn't it.
don't make this your
If
journey.
you worked at a daycare and you quit in 2 weeks, this ain't for you. This ain't your journey. Summer camp, you can't handle that. This isn't for you because now, it's already a lot. Your own children, right? You have your own children. Now you're saying you're going to love someone else's children just as if they were yours. And a lot of people are not realistic and they say, oh, I'm a good person. I can handle somebody else's kids. I can, that's not no big deal. Can you really? Let's talk about it. Can you really? Can you really put your own feelings, your own emotions, your own highs and lows of how well the relationship is going, basing how the other ex person is treating you? Can you handle that when it comes to the children, right? A lot of times I went into my blended family. My stepchildren had a mother. They had a very involved mother. So I didn't go in trying to be their mother, right? I went in just trying to be a support for my husband. And so if you are, and I'm specifically saying a woman because naturally the roles are different. If you are married and you're a husband and a wife, your husband is the leader in the home, whether it's blended or not, and he should be, as he should. So it is important for you as a woman to support him in the decisions that he's making with that family. There are decisions that my husband made, coming up with my stepson that I may not have wanted to make with my children, right? But I have to support him. He also would say, well tell me what you think, because I can tell by your eyes that you don't like what I'm saying. Right. So that's your time to be honest. But always I say be honest in a way that is caring, considerate, and is going to the word that I'm looking for is progression. Don't cause unnecessary stagnation in your family. Don't cause unnecessary strife in your family. Every time your spouse is about to go get their child, you got an attitude.
Wow.
It doesn't breed success. Make your home when if you have blended families and your stepchildren are coming over, make it welcoming. Plan an activity, plan something to do with them, even if it's Uno, even if it's a game, even if it's a movie. Make it intentional so that they can learn, because children can tell a lot sooner than adults if someone is for them or not for them.
Good point.
So you really want to present your home as a safe haven, as if they were at their own home.
Absolutely. I think, she's got all this amazing wisdom about blended families. One of the important things I like to talk about a little bit with regard to blended families is you and the two children that came into the relationship, and then us having two children was very God-centered, right? God was at the center of everything, right? And it helped to create a foundation for you to trust God in your own way. Correct. To love God in your own way. Do you think, and I'm asking this question, I didn't ask her this before, but do you think that in our intentionality in allowing God to be first in our marriage and first in our lives, created a positive environment for you in your relationship with God and in your relationship with your children and your spouse?
Yes. So the reason, and that's another reason why I said, like, if you're not into children, being God-centered really takes yourself out of it. So Our parents, I don't think it's by accident that everybody was a pastor, everybody was in ministry, everybody was held to a certain standard. So when it raising us, it was that standard still needs to apply. So I know that that's God's grace and His intentionality. Because if you are saying that God is the center, right? But you can't figure out how to communicate with your spouse about his child, then hey, we've hit a rock. And maybe you need to enter into your prayer closet, right? Because there are many times that I went to God about how I should approach my husband about a circumstance with his children. Um, or a situation we were dealing with in raising our stepson, because in our blended family, my stepson was great. He communicated well. We have a great bond. We have our own relationship. His older children, we were always close. Actually, one of his children is the reason, is how we met. So I always had a strong connection with them and their children. So I consider myself very blessed. But what I will say is that I've always kept God at the center of it. I've never, even if things have went bad, I say, God, help me with my unforgiveness. Because how am I to be forgiven if I can't forgive? And then on top of that, if I can't forgive a child, or I can't forgive a person who I'm saying is that child's parent, I'm doing it all wrong anyway. So we have to be, when my mom, Dr. Kim, was talking about intentionality, it really has to be intentional. It really has to be on purpose. You really have to say to yourself, okay, today, this is how I'm going to do this. And if it goes left, I'm going to remove myself and tell everyone to have a blessed day. And go in with that. Don't go in, well, if she say something slick to me, hey, then let's get it. Let's get it. I'm about to stand on business because she's not going to talk to me like that. You're already heading it into wrong. You're already presenting yourself on the defense instead of going in with, this is going to go well because I'm going to present myself well, and I'm not going to allow somebody else to pull me out of where I need to be.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important as we talk about the importance of blended families and the success, yay or nay, drama or not, because it doesn't have to be filled with drama.
It does not.
It has to be filled with good choices.
Yes.
How about that?
Correct.
No drama and good choices, right? Choices for change, because we find that we have to be we use this word, and I'm going to say we're not using this word loosely, intentional.
Correct.
Okay, I'm going to say we're going to use that word purposefully. You have to be very intentional on making sure that you create an environment that everyone can build on. And sometimes in blended families, right, we're building the bridge while walking on it, right? Because there are things that we're trying to figure out along the way, and that's absolutely okay, right? So how would you suggest someone that just refuses to accept you as the new parent? And, there's something that you've talked about before that I also want to tap into, is this notion of stepchildren. What does that mean? Where do we get that from? The stepchildren, right? Because that seems so disconnected in a sense. So what would you say about how we define stepchildren? Let me just come back around to that one first. How would you think that we need to kind of expand or remove this notion of stepchildren?
I think it came just to kind of give it that differentiation, because a lot of times parents felt some type of offense is the right word. Offense if you say, oh, that's my mom, or that's my mom too, or that's my dad. So they wanted to feel special. It's about, this is my child who I have. Where, hey, I'm more of like, hey, help, send help. You want to help with the children? Help the village. All throughout the Bible, I'm on this thing where I'm reading the entire Bible this year. And when God is talking about in the beginning about the building of the family and how the family works, it was so much community. It was so much, not just you, your spouse, and your children. It was generations upon generations of families together, growing, aunts, uncles, cousins, all together working together to grow the family. And I think that when we look at it from that perspective, whether it's your stepchild, a lot of people now use bonus children
Yes.
as a term to describe children that they did not naturally have or not biologically theirs. But I feel like you need to use whatever works for you. If your family, it works, it offers no offense, and everybody's cool with it, do whatever works for your family. Um, my family, a lot of people thought my stepson was mine and my daughter was my husband. So, you just never know. We never, because my children were young, they did call my husband dad. They just called both their dads dad. And my stepson calls me Ty. And we never made a big deal about it. It was never something that was required. My children never were required to call my husband dad. It's just something that transitioned and happened. My son was 2 at the time, so he's just talking. So that's who he see all the time. That's who he was calling dad. So I think you have to really look at your family, see what works best for you. Don't go off of whatever works for everybody else may not work for you. So make the decision based upon your family and not any standards of society is what I would say.
Absolutely. Now that's, the standards of society. We struggle very much in trying to create societal norms that don't always work for us, right? They don't work. And you need to figure out in your blended family what works for you. And sometimes the traditional or non traditional role in your blended families depends on your family. Like, particularly for my family, it worked. I was out in corporate America, and um, my children's father was the one that actually helped to get them to school, make lunches, pick them up from school. Our roles were very different, but it didn't make it that one person's role was better than the other, right? It just made it work for us. And so when you're talking to someone about a blended family, and they may not have the traditional roles of the husband going out and the wife staying at home, or the wife doing all the cooking and the husband comes home and wants his dinner on the table, or versus the husband being the cook, because that's in your house.
Correct.
You
My
cook
husband is the chef.
very well.
Yeah.
You cook very well, but your husband is a chef.
Mm-hmm.
He loves to cook.
Correct.
He don't like to clean.
Yeah.
But he likes to cook.
Correct. He's the cooker, not the cleaner. Okay.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
So figuring out what works well as you're in the kitchen, and he's making these amazing dishes because he loves to try a whole lot of stuff, right? And you on the other end having to be the person that washes all the dishes at the end, but that works for you. Tell me, how does that work in your family where non-traditional roles are okay?
I think that people, and this can go outside of blended families, I think that the strategy for your home needs to be ran through God. I think that a lot of times we plan what we want, what we're going to do, what we're going to say, how we're going to say it, and we leave God as the afterthought. And when it comes to your family, who God holds you responsible for, you need to seek him first. So God may tell you, hey, I want him to stay home and I want you to do this, or I want you to, okay, I know that you're used to going out of the home, but I want you to stay home and now him be the leader in this way. Then that's a strategy that you need to take up with God. I do think that if you are not considering God first, you're leaving something on the table. I believe that a lot of times we think that we have it. God has strategically showed me things about my children and my stepchildren just in prayer and spending time with him. Wow. There are times, my stepson just last week, he came home. He was on spring break. He goes to play basketball. He really, in his dreams, he is LeBron James, and I support him 100%. And he's watching LeBron James right coming for you. He goes to a thing where they pray, and during the little breaks in between, there's a minister there who prays with the basketball players, and they have a little study time. And he came home asking me some questions about God. Then God intentionally had Selah come home with her friend, and she brought home Bibles for them. And I said, God is trying to strategically grow you right now. That's why he's presenting you with his word. So don't think that you can't minister to your stepchildren. Don't think that you won't be able to be successful in the upbringing of their lives. If you strategically leverage your relationship with God, it will grow and it will be successful.
Wow, isn't that something? This has been such an amazing conversation, y'all. Y'all, right? And my southern y'all, right? Were y'all ready? Were y'all ready for this conversation? Because there's so much that can happen that is purposely designed by God.
Yes.
Purposely designed by God. And so when we take the steps necessary to integrate God in the decisions that we make every day, wow, I'm of the, to simply imagine the possibilities. And so as we talk about change, as we talk about imagining the possibilities, this speaks directly to understanding that real change begins with you first. Your expectation of someone else changing before you decide to change sets you up on a pathway of failure, right? But starting with you first, right? When I decided to make real, purposeful, intentional changes about my life, it was with God in at the center. We talked about that. God at the center. So I want to thank you. Listen, y'all, this is just one great conversation in our Let's Just Talk About It that Ty is going to be joining us. I hope that you enjoyed our conversation today about blended families, yay or nay, drama or not, and that you were able to take away something that was said today that will help you to build on your relationships with your children. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got some amazing resources I want to share with you as well as we wrap up this session of Let's Just Talk About It. I want to talk about these few resources. Tyler talked about resource and opportunity to be blessed with and putting my pen to paper. One of my first books, which is When Change Becomes Your Only Option. When change becomes your only option is when you think of times in your life when things have gone haywire, right? And you're at the edge, right? You are at the edge, and you would have never imagined yourself to have been there. So when change becomes your only option, there are times when you feel lost in the middle of chaos. But I want you to know that change creates an environment for you to do something different, for you to imagine the possibilities and think more openly about how your life can be adjusted at your own hand. You have a hand in it. Not everybody else having an opinion, but that you have a hand in it. So this is my great book, When Change Becomes Your Only Option. And then I'll tell you how to get these resources. My second book I want to share with you as a great resource is Thinking Out Loud About Change. And as you see, the common denominator here is change. Learning how to appreciate the power of change that gives you an opportunity to experience it at a multiplicity of levels. Listen, if you didn't know it, the only thing constant is change. Everything happening in our lives today has something to do with change. We change our hair, we change our clothes, we change our jobs, we change our education, we change our careers. Change is happening in every area of our lives. We were young at one time. Now we're older. We're in marriages. We're out of marriages. We're going to school. We're graduating from school. Change is happening in so many areas of our life. So this book, when Thinking Out Loud About Change, is a great resource that I want to encourage you to get. My last resource is my book, which is the companion to Thinking Out Loud About Change, is this journal. This is a great resource that you can use in connection with the book the Word of God says, write the vision down and make it plain. right? Write it down. Talk about the things in your life that you want to change. Now, change doesn't happen by osmosis. Change happens very purposefully and very intentionally, right? So, this journal is a great opportunity for you to write it down, be able to go back and read, and be very authentic with yourself in your journal. I use this journal. I write down my thoughts. I write down the things that I need God to do in my life. I write everything down that I need from God. And I also write in my journal what God needs from me. So I want you to take advantage of these 3 resources. All 3 of them can be found on Amazon.com. Go in, do a quick search in any one of these titles. You can also do a search by my name, Dr. K. Mischele Watson, and we can just have lots of relationships and partnerships so we can just talk about it. Thank you again for joining us on this amazing episode. There is so much more in store, so make sure you join us next week, same time, on many of our social media platforms. We're going to be on Instagram, we're going to be on Facebook, we're going to be on TikTok, we're going to be on all social media platforms. So make sure you join us, YouTube, subscribe, and listen in to what we have to say as we simply just talk about it. Thank you again for joining us.
Well, everyone, that's all we got time for right now, but we'll keep the conversations moving and topics flowing. Join us for a new episode every Sunday at 8 p.m. for Let's Just Talk About It. Don't miss it, and don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We'll always have a little something for you if you do. I'm your host, Dr. K. Mischele Watson, and I'll see you on our next episode. Be blessed.